Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Trendy John from Simpler Trading. Let's go ahead and get started with this week's broad market analysis. Before we do so, if you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and hitting that like button. I really appreciate everyone's support. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's get started with this week's major U.S. economic reports and Fed speakers. The reason why we look at this is because this information can cause volatility in the market. And quite honestly, with as many days as we've gone up, and I'll show you that here later, I would expect a little bit of digestion or some sort of volatility to come in, especially coming off of Black Friday. And from what I hear, it was a good one. So that could be pushing price into some resistance as we open. And then who knows, perhaps Jerome could come in, say something that would cause a little volatility from that area of resistance or that sell zone. So get ready. He is speaking right before the market opens, and you could see that here on Monday, December 1st. On the 2nd, we have another Fed head speaking here, and then we have some auto sales. On Wednesday, ADP employment numbers, and then we move on down to S&P final US services PMI and ISM services. On Thursday, Friday Eve, as I like to call it, we are looking at initial jobless claims, U.S. trade deficit, and then Fed Vice Chair Michelle speaking once again. To end out the week on Friday, we have core PCE, consumer sentiment. Let's go ahead and move on now. We're going to take a look at this week's earnings. Now, the reason why I like to cover earnings is because one, I actually trade into earnings on some of my favorite names. But this week, there's not a whole lot of names that really get me going here. Matter of fact, the only one that I really want to point out is going to be CrowdStrike. Okay. And that's for me personally because I do hold shares in this company, have done very well. Matter of fact, about a year and a half ago, I took advantage of that scare that they had. Prices pulled back, like really pulled back. And then we got long there, and I continue to stay long and very happy about that purchase. So I'm just curious how they're going to do. If you are interested in any names on here and would like to understand the buy and sell zones that I would trade into earnings, please let me know, and I'll be happy to go over those with you. The next thing we're going to look at is the bigger picture. The bigger picture is so important, especially this year and especially going into next year. And the reason why I say that is because price is quite extended here on the quarterly. So each one of these candles represent one quarter. And what you're going to notice specifically on this chart is that when we look here, the 9 EMA and where current price is pretty far from one another. And what we know from going back all the way since the inception of the market is that price likes to hang out and at least come back and touch these levels before moving back up. Again, it's not if, it's when. So we want to take note of this diversion and just understand that at some point price will either come back to touch this 9 EMA or somehow this 9 EMA will make its way closer to price and perhaps price just goes sideways. For now, we only have 1 month until the end of the year. We've hit the SPY 2025 projection. You'll notice that we're in this gray box. We're above 677.89. And as long as we stay above that level, I'm looking for the next move into 694. And of course, I do believe that a lot of traders are probably looking for the round number of 700. Okay. Now, when you look at this, this is right around the corner. I mean, today or tonight, we could open up and prices could be up quite a bit just because of overall sentiment out there during Black Friday. Or perhaps we just move off of last week's bullishness as well. Matter of fact, I really like SPY going into this week. It looks very bullish, but there's one key level I'm going to talk about here in a second. All I want you to understand on this quarterly is that our bigger support going into the end of the year and into the early parts of 2026 is 611 by 560 at the moment. If prices were to come back into there because of some big catalyst, then I would be looking at going long there. Matter of fact, as far as my portfolio is concerned, I continue to stay long, but the more that we have this diversion between here, I continue to also take profits and just be careful. And yes, I am hedging, but to be very transparent, hedges aren't doing very well. We just aren't getting that really, really big pullback. Okay. Let's go into a smaller time frame, which is the weekly, which is a lot of people, their favorite. They want to go from week to week. And really, this broad market analysis really focuses on the week to week. And so these levels are really important for you going into the first through the fifth. What I want to talk about is that we got above the 618. Once we get above that 618, I'm looking for a move into the 88.7, which puts us around 685. Now you'll notice we are very close to that. What's really important about this is pivotal. This 88.7 is also in line with smaller sell zones. And because of that, it is resistance until proven otherwise. If for some reason we only gap up, say, I don't know, 15 to 25 points, just understand that you are gapping up into a little bit of resistance on SPY. If for some reason we gap up and over that, I want you to use this 685.33 as your support, and we would be looking to try and slowly, probably stair step on the 4-hour to get up here towards the all-time high. Now, I believe the NASDAQ or the QQQ is headed into a little bit more resistance. It doesn't look as bullish as the SPY for this week, but listen, the Qs like to lead the market. So if we get a really big gap up because of, let's say, sentiment over Black Friday, a lot of people are shopping, tech's looking really good, a lot of things are people are buying, then we could see again further movements to the upside, and you may even see SPY make a new all-time high. Now, I don't want to promise that into this week. Timing is the variable, but your key levels for this week are going again 685, and then your support is coming in at 678 by 675. So once again, from a weekly standpoint, if price were to come back into this area, this is where I'd be looking for a bounce to move back up towards this 88.7. If we gap into the 88.7, it is resistance until proven otherwise. And if we get up and over this level, this is your support, okay, for the week. Let's go ahead and move on now into the Qs, and same thing. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bigger picture, and that is going to be your quarterly. We're in the 2025 projection. We hit our level of 629. Matter of fact, I was just looking for 618 this year, but we continue to stay in this zone. We got a little bit of a top and wick. Things slowed down a little bit. We got, I guess you could say, like a small scare. The overall sentiment was extremely fearful. And believe it or not, it is actually still extreme fear this week, which I'm going to be honest, I was kind of surprised after the big rally that we've experienced so far for the last 6 days or so. But we'll look into that here a little bit later towards the end of this video on smaller time frames. As far as this is concerned, it's the same as the SPY. I'm looking for this area in here to be support, that 9 EMA. If you want to find it, all we need to do is come into the pivot low and into the pivot high of this year. I want you to find, in this case, 23.6 is your near-term support, but going into the end of the year and early parts of 2026, what I would focus on is the 38.2 all the way into the 618. That is going to be my support. It's also aligned with the 9 EMA, and just like the SPY, there's a lot of diversion between the two. At some point, we will touch that 9 EMA, or 9 EMA will come up the further we go up, and then perhaps we go sideways. There's a couple different looks on this. Again, I'll be doing my projections for 2026 towards the end of this month, so be looking out for that. Now, that won't be something that's on YouTube. That's something that's specifically for our members so that we have our blueprint going into 2026. So again, if you're not a member, make sure you sign up. We'll see you in there. Let's go ahead and take this off. We'll go into the smaller time frame, which is the weekly. Like I said, this is more popular for a lot of traders. They're just trying to look for the week to week. The quarterly is really what drives my portfolio, if you will. So the long-term stuff. Just like the SPY here, we moved over the 618, but remember on the SPY, current price is all the way up here towards the 88.7 where we still have a lot of room. So what you're going to notice here on the Qs is that I also included my next favorite coefficient of the Fibonacci, and that is the 76.4. So levels to the upside, if you want, you could combine these two and basically say this area in here is going to be resistance until proven otherwise, which is around 624 into 630. Okay. Current price is at 619. So same story as a SPY. If we were to gap up into this, expect resistance, okay? If we gap up and over 88.7, that's a different story. That's where it becomes support. What I would do is understand that this is resistance, but if we gap above this, use this as your near support and just trade off of that line and see if we can move up into this area here, okay? If we gap up and we're right underneath this, and say we open up tomorrow morning and we're right underneath this zone, that is going to be resistance, and be looking for the same thing in SPY. And of course, we'll run through this with you tomorrow morning before the market opens, okay? Big support for this week, let's just call it for right now, 615 by 610, okay? We want those levels to hold, all right, by the end of this coming Friday, all right? Notice that we came down into this cloud as well on the weekly. This is what I mean on the quarterly. This is what we want to see in a bullish market, that this is overall support, okay? All right, so we went through the QQQ and the SPY on the higher time frame and the lower time frame. Let's go ahead and get into our next portion of this BMA, and that's going to be the dollar. And actually, we stopped right at the level that was one of your major levels for last week. So let me go over those again. 101.5 to the upside is a major level, and 99.46, same levels as last week, major level to the downside. In most cases, when prices push to the downside, the market continues to move up. See what I mean? So we pushed into resistance. This is the sell zone, okay? This was support, then it turns into resistance. So price came up to this area. It is resistance until proven otherwise. The dollar came down a little bit and the market continued to push up. The issue that we have at this major level that I gave you is that this is now support until proven otherwise. This is resistance. So we have like this small area in here where on this side, we need to actually be cautious. So we want it to drop, but it's also dropped right into support. So if the dollar starts to kind of push back up to the upside here, we're probably going to see a little bit of choppiness to down in the market. But that's not really a big deal because, as I said earlier, we've had quite a few days that we've just moved up. And after so many days, the market likes to digest, okay? Major levels, again, 99.46 and 101.5 right here. Just be a little cautious and look to see what we get in the overall market. Let's go ahead and now move on to our next chart, which is going to be the TNX, okay? So this is your 10-year Treasury, and I like to use right over here, Trading View. Now, again, I'm expecting this to drop down into the 3.8 level. We got very close earlier in the year. It continues to do what I talk about. There's not much to talk about on here because the bigger levels are in the green zone or at the red zone. Neither one has happened in a very long time. There's really nothing to report on here, okay? So let's go ahead and minimize that. Next thing we're going to look at is going to be the skew. All right. So when we talk about the skew, let me go ahead and just say it's an indicator that is developed by the Chicago Board Options Exchange. And really at the end of the day, it's just perceiving, it's perceived tail risk in the S&P 500. All right, so tail risk refers to the risk of extreme market movements, either positive or negative. So for example, when the skew, all right, and once this thing wants to register here, give me 1 second. When the skew is high, basically what's happening here is that things are really euphoric in the market. And as I've been saying, the extreme levels are in this red zone and extreme levels are down in this zone. The closer we are to this level, it means that there's more fear in the market and the major participants are on the put side. So we're actually looking, as long as the charts that I'm showing you on the SPY, Qs, ES, NASDAQ, those kind of things are lining with this. So we don't just make trades just based off of this, but if there's alignment and it looks very close, then we start to trade according to all this. This is why it's so important. So as more fear comes into the market, you start to see the skew drop. All right, participants are getting on the put side, and what usually happens? The market rips, they're wrong, their hedges, right? Their puts kind of get like spanked, and then markets continue to move up, especially in a bullish market. When it's extremely euphoric, you start to see the skew rise up towards this area. And this is where you want to be careful and where you want to also buy insurance. So when I say buy insurance, I mean for myself. This is where I'm looking to buy puts. If you're buying puts when the market's going down, I just think it's a little ridiculous. It's better to buy when things are going up, the premiums are smaller. It's cheaper to buy that insurance just in case a storm does roll in. Okay. At the moment, you'll notice that the skew is around 143. It didn't change so much from last week. Really, there's not a whole lot to talk about. I like the extreme levels. So at the moment, the skew is not a huge part of what I'm doing. I'm just taking note of it at this time. Okay. Let's go ahead and move down. The next thing we're going to look at is the fear and greed index. It did go up. So the lows, I think it was around like 7 or something. Let's look right here. It says 1 week ago is around 12. All right. So 12 to 24, but it's still an extreme fear, which actually surprised me. I thought after such a big rally of about, I want to say it's been about 6 days that we've rallied, that we would actually probably be more around the fear and closer to neutral. So guess what? The market can continue to move up if it wants to, but let's see what happens first, okay, before we get too excited. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to look at here on our broad market analysis is our ES futures. And this is where we get to break it down and look at the top down approach. So going with a higher time frame. And it's going to look a lot like the SPY. I'm going to give you some major levels just based off of coefficients here. This was a really bullish candle after several weeks down. All right. And just to point out, this week was actually not down. If you look very close, it actually closed above the close of this one. This was more of an inside week, so it was more of a breather or doji candle, and then we continued down. So there was a break there, but it felt like 4 weeks down, right? Then we get this really, really bullish candle here. I have to say, this is going to be interesting. I'm going to give you a couple scenarios here. So what's been really popular is three soldiers, right? Three white soldiers is what it's called. And that pattern looks a lot like this. So could we move for the next 2 weeks and have something like this and break out into that 7,000 plus? Yes, we 100% could. Okay. So, but the next scenario I want to also show you after such a big candle up and so close to this resistance point, and I was showing you on the QQQs that we still have some distance to go, it almost feels, all right, two scenarios here. It almost feels that we could pop and then drop and have what we call an inside week. Let me show you what that looks like. So we open up, we're bullish, we get into some resistance, and then we come in, and then we have what's called an inside candle for this week. And then we would roll into the second week of December and then get our inside and up formation. And then we roll into the end of the year, kind of like that. Okay. So we build that base. So basically, what I'm saying is I believe we're either going to close inside and we'll get better ideas, right? We'll get better ideas by looking at the top of this past week's body. Basically, if you drop below the body, okay, 68.57, you're below that, then that becomes that top, and anything below that, you just assume, until proven otherwise, that we are going to be inside. All right, so just know what that is, and of course, I'm going to coach you through the whole entire week, but that is a major level, okay? Notice that it looks like the SPY. We have the 618, we're over that, right? That means bulls are back in charge, by the way. Okay. And we also have that high probability we're going to see the 88.7. All right. So those things have aligned. And just like the SPY, if we gap up into this, it's resistance till proven otherwise. If we gap over, that's going to be your support. If we just kind of open up sideways or down, these two lines above are resistance. And if we were to come down into support, this is where I want to be looking to get long. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Now let's move on into the day. This is where I was talking about we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. I apologize. I think I said 6. We had 5 days to the upside. A couple things that have happened here. We've gone from red candles into white. Basically, we had crossovers, and you can see that right in this area here, which is telling me that the momentum is changing. You'll also notice that we have green banners all the way across here. So the ES looks a little bit different than the NASDAQ. According to banners, we are in a bullish, all right, bullish trend here. So I'm looking to buy the dip. no matter what, but only at levels that I am going over. So on the daily, I have what's called trigger longs. These are levels where I'd be interested in getting long, but again, I don't do it blindly. I look at the smaller time frame and assess and then go, okay, cool. The risk and rewards there, I'm going to take the trade. You'll notice to the upside, we have a yellow and a red level here. We have resistance and a short trigger. Same thing. It's just two identified levels where you could see those things happen. It's not a guarantee, but just understand that when prices get there, we look at the smaller time frame and then we will assess from there. Okay. On the 4 hour, what I like about these is just kind of go over the weekly edges. So your upper weekly edge, let's just say 68.37 or so, and then down here 66.51 to the lower weekly edge. That's our weekly levels. We closed above those. Because of that, these are support until proven otherwise. Up above around 68.86 to 69.09. We actually have a 4 hour inside and down. We can see resistance in there. So again, support, resistance, and down here, nice imbalance around 67.20. I'd like to see buyers show up there. And then the lower the weekly edge, 66.51, this is where I would expect buyers to come in as well. Okay, let's go ahead and move on into the NASDAQ. As I said, the NASDAQ was a little bit different this week, and we'll start by looking at the banners. So when you look at the banners, one thing that sticks out is the monthly is still neutral. Please understand that. We're sitting right around the 618, so we really don't have that established base up and over this. We just kind of got over it. And that's a big deal because in a bigger picture, I like to at least see 3 days above the 618 and a nice base there. Okay, so that's around 25,446. But listen, if we gap up, resistance, just like I showed you on the Qs, 25,811 by 26,119, I would just create a zone there and say, hey, that's resistance. So if we were to gap into that, you're opening up into resistance. I would expect price to pull back a little bit, okay? Your support for this week is 25,446 by 25,053. That is your support, and that's where I'd be looking at buying on the weekly. Moving on into the daily, same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll notice that we have not crossed over and got that white candle yet. And because of that, you'll also notice, again, we have the neutral here. So my overall sentiment, according to banners, okay, this is not based on my bias, it's based on my banners, is that we're neutral here. Yes, the daily and the weekly are bullish and the yearly, but we do have a neutral in there. So just be flexible is all I'm saying, okay? Resistance, short triggers, long triggers, they're all on here. Again, take note of them. You can pause the video. And again, one more reminder, please hit the like button. All right, it only takes just a few seconds to hit that like button. We get anywhere from 600 to 800 views and about 100 likes. That means about 500 to 600 people just listen to me and say, nope, don't want to do that. Remember, I do these things for you. I'm doing this on my own time on a Sunday. I'm not asked to do this. It's something I like to do just to see and at least help traders who are out there who might use levels to help them guide themselves. And if you're watching, I'm assuming that this is helping you, and I'm just asking for that really fast like on this video. Thank you so much. All right, moving on into the 4 hour. Again, guys, I want you to see the upper and the lower edges. Real quick on the edges, we'll go to a whiteboard. You have upper edge. And what you don't see is I don't have it turned on, but these are actually zones. These are sell zones and buy zones, right? When prices are down towards the low end of the curve or the buy zone, this is where we're looking to go long. And when prices get closer to the sell zones, we are looking to either go short on confirmation or we're looking to pull those stops up. What we're noticing, well, sorry, not what we're noticing, what's happening going into this week is that so far, we're going to open above these weekly edges. And when we're above these weekly edges, we look for these areas to be support. So what was resistance is now support, okay? If we break that back down below those, I don't want to go short until we cross over these levels and we're getting sell signals and so forth, okay? So that's why these are important. These are going to be support until proven otherwise for right now on the 4 hour. Just like the ES futures, we have a little 4 hour zone that's up here. Just take note of that. That could be your resistance on a move further up. And Trendy members, we are on both ends of this currently in what we call the ACDC setup, accelerator decelerator equals ME. You know what that means if we're in the room. So we're looking for that to play out. And I'd be paying attention to the 4 hour 9 EMA clouds. The next thing that I want to show you is going to be Bitcoin. All right, so on Bitcoin, we want to go to the higher time frame. So the quarter, or sorry, right here, the quarterly is important. We got so close to the 25 projection. It feels too far away for only a month for me to be accurate on this 2025 projection. I was really happy when we were up here. You know, I hold Bitcoin. I'm a long-term holder, not a short-term, but I still like to update here. What I like about the long term is we came into the 9 EMA and I made a note in the room. I really like this. I mean, really, this is what I like to see on the ES and the NASDAQ futures. I do believe it's going to happen. Timing is the variable. I just don't know when, but this is the kind of look that I wanted to talk about. You come down into the 9, we get that bounce, and that's a nice thing. I believe right now for Bitcoin, it will be very interesting. You know, do we actually close the year up on, again, 3 soldiers to the upside? Or is this thing just going to bounce up here and close on the inside and go into the new year kind of like a inside candle, if you will? This one's going to be interesting because what played out here is what I was looking for, the ES and NASDAQ. I shouldn't say I was looking for it. We're actually, everything's working perfectly in the ES and NASDAQ. I'm actually just looking for prices to at least come into, you know, I just would have felt more comfortable is what I'm trying to say if this would have already happened. So now if this doesn't happen, we're going into 2026, kind of like we came into 2025 where it's like, hey, this is awesome, but it's also very difficult to press the gas here because it feels really, really extended. Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and now move on to the smaller picture and we'll go into the weekly. The big thing that I want you to understand here is this is going to be resistance. This bearish golden pocket, that's when you combine the 50 and 618. I believe this would be a stopping point, even if we continue to rally. This will be the big level in December. We get up and over the 10,000, let's say 11,000. Things look really good for a possible high for the year. Right now, what I love about going into this week is we have the inside candle. So are we going to go inside and up or inside and down? Bulls, I'm bullish as soon as we get over 91,000. Let's just round up 91,700. Again, I'm looking for a push all the way up here towards 100,000 again. If for some reason bulls we drop below 88,000, then again, continue short, probably down into about 84 again. I don't know if we take out the lows. I feel like 84 is a key number, and then up here 98 to 100,000 is a key number. I would just kind of stay still, be neutral until those levels hit. Okay, that is my broad market analysis. I really appreciate everyone. Have an amazing time. And please, again, hit that like button and have a wonderful weekend. See you tomorrow morning. See you soon.